What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the debut album by Good Charlotte. Basically, this project is self-titled and it came out in the fall of 2000, the year 2000. So I'd have to say about this particular project, the good concept about it here is this is an initial kind of emo and more punk type project to kind of get here. It's a little bit around this time, Blink 182 was a smash hit, pitches like that with their All the Small Things songs and pitch some of those type fairs. What's My Name Again, some of those type pitches. Just would have to say just the concept of some of these type ones off of their hit album Enema of the State and some of those type fairs. But yeah, basically college romp type music, frat type music, pitches like that, pop punk type tunes were really popular throughout the late 90s, early 2000s. This was an initial type one. But the thing about this particular project is just the fact that it didn't seem like the phrase emo, definitely probably not seen this yet, but emo in particular was just kind of a more taboo and just kind of more obscure type word back in 2000. I'd have to say, I definitely think it fleshed out by the time you got to 2002 with like Good Charlotte's second album, The Young and the Restless, some of those type pitches. I mean, punk was definitely around from like the 90s and further back as far as those pitches kind of have. But in terms of like the emo subgenre, it kind of felt like this was starting to get some meld. I mean, obviously there were probably albums that were relatively emo, probably in the 80s or 90s, but in terms of it becoming, this is definitely one of those type ones that helped commercialize it a lot, help kind of get to like the more widespread this overall aspect of some of these. This is, I mean, the initial kind of trend of the emo type albums that kind of popped off in like the 2000s when you think of Panic at the Disco, when you think of like Fall Out Boy, some of those type folks, and other folks like, uh, you know, uh, like I forget who they're called, but the ones that dropped Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge, I'd have to say. My Chemical Romance, some of those type folks, just further emo projects. This is an initial type one. But this was also big around the time because MTV was starting to. This particular album got some MTV airplay as far as those pitches kind of particularly happened with it as things started to advance from new metal and some of those type fairs. Punk was starting to get more largely popular once again with folks like Blink 182 and other folks like that. Can't really think of too many right now. There were some other ones. I've reviewed them across the course of the past good while, but I can't think of them as full blown. But yeah, this was kind of, I mean, this is a relatively seminal project here. I'd have to say, especially in like the alternative and punk type fold, hot topic type fair. I'd have to say it's a good concept to kind of get this here. I would definitely suppose that the commercial aspects of this album are not quite as large. I'd say this album might have went platinum, something like that. But really, the only single off this project really barely charted on like the Billboard 100. It was in the bubbling under 100 singles, I'd have to say. But it did get some airplay. It did get some MTV spins, probably some VH1 spins, some pitches like that, I'd have to say. But it was really their second album from 2002, The Young and the Restless, that had the four singles, including Lifestyles, The Rich and the Famous, and some of those type ones like Boys and Girls, some of those type pitches. Don't remember every single one. I mean, I do own that album, but I need to listen to it a little bit more as far as those pitches. But I do remember most of the single. I do remember the four singles from that particular project. But this was the initial kickoff that kind of got their foot in the door more as far as the particular breakout album from 2002. And then they had a hit album from 2004 as well with the Chronicles of Life and Death, which had some good, decent bops on there. But yeah, I look after it. So this is kind of a big deal. Once again, an initial type emo kickoff of a project, but I kind of look after it just being able to say, thing about it is it's kind of rough around the edge. It's kind of rough around the edges, similar to like Blink 182's Dude Ranch, which I reviewed back in January or February this year, where I reviewed it and said it was decently, it was pretty solid within the concept of it, just kind of rough around the edges in terms of melding their sound. It wasn't quite their commercial breakthrough. This is one of those type products where it's good, has the aspects behind it, has a lot of hits on here, but in terms of like the casual and kind of widespread commercial type appeal, it's a little bit more sketchy and more rough draft type appeal about it. But it's definitely, I mean, I would say I probably would feel like Young and the Restless is probably their 2002 album's a little bit more of a classic just because that one's a little bit more realized. But if you do want like the initial raw type stuff, just the pitch behind an initial kind of emo format, some of the hungrier type sound of just like the song formats of that just being a more raw type format, this is a good concept kind of get that. But also as a result, this one's kind of kid centric. So this feels, I don't know their particular age, if they were like teenagers, early 20s, if they're old enough to drink around this particular time, but it just doesn't, it feels more of like a kind of class romping and just more day antics more so than actually bar hopping and nightclub bound as far as those pitches kind of happen. Whether or not they were just stationing that themselves or whether the fact they just chose, it just feels like the singles off this particular product were more oriented towards like the MTV crowd of not necessarily like folks that would have been seniors, juniors, seniors in high school and in early years of college, but just more amongst the aspects of kind of more, it just feels more frolicking, at least in the singles. Like songs like Little Things just feel more oriented for like late elementary school, early junior high, some pitches like that. But I just look after the concept. Some of these just have a little bit more of like an angsty type tone, which is the aspect. I mean, it's a good concept because this is like a good gateway album here, and I like the concept. I do like the song "Little Things," despite the fact that it's more younger oriented. But this is kind of the pitch that some of this, if you're looking for like beer swilling, just kind of get carnivorous. There's not really like house party type crazes. I mean, that particular stuff is definitely on like the Chronicles of Life and Death, and minor traces, or at least relative traces, on Young and the Restless from 2002. But I look after this a little bit more just kind of standard dredge of just tasks, whether it's school or work or just pitches like that. It's pretty rather vanilla, not so much like a high octane kind of craze of a project. But so yeah, there were three singles out this project. Like I said, most of these singles did not heavily chart, including like the banner lead single "Little Things." It was a pretty solid MTV staple for like the early 2000s. I had to say, definitely got them some notoriety. I'd have to say, but this is not it's not in terms of controversy, but it just got them some publicity. I'd have to say, but this album was rather here and there. I once again would have to recommend the casual starting point for probably most folks is probably Young and Restless or Young and the Hopeless from 2002. I'd have to say, but I look after it. Some good concepts. But yeah, Little Things is the lead single. This is like an angsty kind of initial emo single. I'd have to say it's like a moody kind of late summer bounce about this particular song. Definitely like a neighborhood romp and like a hot day kind of frolic to kind of get here. I'd have to say. So it's just so it's just a dope concept kind of get this one. Just pretty much like a lighter, younger brother, like the sort of pitch that they kind of had with their Young and Hopeless album from 2002. They just perfected that particular pop punk sound and just really melded into it. Like so many songs out that particular product were just MTV and punk and radio staples as far as those pitches going to happen. But this is like an initial kickoff. I think on the right day, if you're lucky enough, you might be able to hear Little Things. Is this kind of like a relatively kind of this kind of fun, and just like it's a novel song to kind of get here. I like the concept of it. Just for shout out for folks that remember Good Charlotte as far back as those particular times kind of went. It's an initial kickoff type one. It's like remembering about Eminem more in like the Slim Shady LP days or even like the Slim Shady EP days. Just kind of a concept of an initial type hit, but this is probably the biggest charting song on here. Surprisingly, on like Spotify, it has 76 million plays. I mean, considering that it wasn't like a Billboard 100 single, that's pretty good just within the concept of like the chart appeal behind it. But I do think the word of mouth and just overall emo and hot topic social alternative type buzz about this song is pretty large. So I look at this a good concept. But the second single is the Motivation Proclamation. This is a decent one. I do recommend this song, but it's not as full blown like an immediate kind of beeline highlight just because it's a dreary type one. But just I feel like the dredge behind it is just more for strictly just after class or works and pitches like that. But this is like a dreary kind of after tasks unwind, I'd have to say. It's like a malaise kind of pop punk relief of a song to kind of get after some things. Just done with the relative dredge of the day, I'd have to say. And it's like an emo. This is another initial emo kind of settle in for the day or night as far as those pitches going to happen. Maybe smoke a little bit just within the tone behind it. Now look after just the connotation behind this particular song is just kind of saying that just dealing with the standard day, the standard makeshift kind of atmosphere as far as those pitches kind of happen. But I just look after it. If you don't have that particularly in mind, if you're just picking up this record years later, just within that fair, and you don't have so many things that you have to get done, I just would look after this. It's just a good song to kind of smoke at like 4:30 p.m., 5:30 p.m. when the sun is orange and pitches like that. It's a good concept for some of that type fare, I'd have to say. But it is just a relatively dreary type one. I mean, I can see why the song didn't chart as heavily, just because I feel like the impact of Little Things, definitely a novel idea and just a good aspect of a song to kind of get, but Motivation Proclamation just really slowed down the tempo. It's a real kind of B-leaguer type one compared to it, and I just feel like it probably needed another follow-up. But they realized that on their 2002 album, so it's just kind of concept. But it's not like that was a fault. It's just a different, it's just a different tone. But Festival Song is the third single. This has some good Festival Song is the third single. This has some good energy about it. I mean, it's too bad that this song didn't chart either, but it has the right idea. I'd have to say it's like a Foo Fighters-esque kind of in motion social fare. I would definitely feel like it's like some good day commerce and get some grub type tune to kind of get here just in like standard outing. Like the song says, Festival Song, get like some hot dogs, some funnel cakes, some pitches like that. Just get some good fare, get some nachos, some of that type of fare. Just grub, fraternize, just enjoy outings as far as those pitches kind of happen. Basic kind of standard activity. This is a pretty nice one to kind of get here just because it doesn't really have as much like full blown like single type focus. Just really, this one just feels like another good frolic type song to kind of get a little bit less on your mind compared to Little Things. I mean, this one feels less like an emo song, but it does just feel like a punk kind of energy, or just out and about, just standard socialness. Just kind of get with that one, just nice one. good song, kind of get this would be a good song. But then really, Good Charlotte has not been around since 2018, which is kind of something to talk about. Just to be able to say that I kind of low key noticed that they haven't put out a project in over 6 years as far as those pitches kind of happen. But it's just some good concepts kind of get some of these real balanced three singles. Even though I feel like Festival Song probably should have been the second single instead of Motivation Proclamation, but Little Things is definitely a good snappy type one. Just has that good appeal. This good concept for some initial kind of kickoff. Should have some good nostalgia about this song. And then Motivation Proclamation is just a jury type one. Festival songs like some good social outs and like Dayfair. Good concepts. But yeah, I look after it just being able to say there's 14 songs on this particular album. The hidden track is Thank You Mom as far as those pitches kind of happen. But out of those 14 songs or 13 songs, I wound up recommending 9, I would have to say. I don't know as full blown whether or not I would count that 14th song. I mean, for the most part, there's 5 songs I don't recommend on here. To talk about some of these real quick, the 5 songs I don't recommend, which is just easier to say it that way, would just be Waldorf Worldwide, Seasons, Screamer, Change, and Thank You Mom. Basically, the last 3 songs in this project, Screamer, Change, and Thank You Mom, are just some more homely type ones in just a more dreary type sense. It's like a worse variation of Motivation Proclamation. Just loses the appeal of that particular song and just has a lot more, this kind of more house cleaning type fare, just more aspects that just are more kind of relatively just kind of, I don't want to say like a little bit more peppy and plucky as far as those pitches kind of go along with it, but it just doesn't have the overall bite of like the severity. I just feel like Motivation Proclamation just nailed those vibes better. It's the same thing with Seasons. This is another one that kind of drops the ball in that particular pitch. Some of these type ones, I feel like they were trying to do this sort of pitch to like Papa Roach and like folks like Alien Ant Farm, some of those type folks that alternative metal cats kind of do pretty well. Just didn't really nail it nearly as well as those particular ones, I'd have to say. Just some folks like that, trying to think of some other ones apart from Alien Ant Farm, but just some of those relative type folks, probably like Nickelback or Stain, some of those type folks either doing post grunge or alternative metal, but just didn't nail it as well. I say Waldorf Worldwide is just kind of a frolicking type one, like a decent, could have been almost decent companion to Little Things, but I just didn't appreciate the instrumentation. That one was just a little bit kind of rough around the edges, just had meldings I just didn't appreciate as well, I'd have to say, as this kind of concept. Most of this album's pretty damn good, I just would have to say. I mean, yeah, this album lacks like a song with the social snap and the overall just bite and overall bite and capacity of Little Things, but considering that was basically like damn near their first single and initial kind of kickoff that got their foot in the door, I'm not really mad about that particular concept, I'd say. There are some gems on here. One in particular that's pretty good, that has some good house party type appeal, is Complicated. This is like a pop punk kind of commercial relative socialized of a song, socialized bounce, I'd have to say. Good concept for that. It's like a vanilla kind of house party jig, I would feel like, and this is just like some late summer bounce to kind of get here. So it's just good concept. This one, I mean, despite the fact that this album seems more younger oriented, not quite as full blown, like, full blown full time job and just paying complete bills, and just the aspect of just, going out, getting crunk, some of those type fares, just the aspect of standard socializing in nightclub, traverse and weaving pitches like that. I'd say it's just a relative good hangout type song, kind of getting to some more lambent kind of late summer type tone or autumn type fare as far as those pitches kind of happen. It's more house party type bound to kind of get here, but it is a good concept. Definitely, I probably would say that there need to be songs like this. I mean, they perfected, Good Charlotte definitely perfected this particular type song of a house party type fare. I want to say like the lead single or the highest charting single, which I'll probably put in the connotation off of the Chronicles of Life and Death, just nailed this particular vibe of this song just a lot better. I mean, this one's a little bit more of like a lazy type one, just a standard kind of light licked, almost acoustic type one, but the single off of their 2004 album just nailed this particular house party vibe with some good concepts. I'd say probably the most immediate ones off this product would be Little Things and Complicated. I had to say, with a little bit of East Coast anthem in there. To talk about East Coast anthem, this is a nice one. This is like a grimy kind of late day dredge of a song, I'd have to say. This one goes well with Motivation Proclamation. A little bit more bustled, though, I'd have to say, and it's just a good one to get some errands done, I'd have to say. So this really does feel like almost like a rap song in some sense. It's just kind of the concept of something that you'd hear like Joe Budden or Ghostface Killah, some of those type folks on, just in a more kind of just hop and bop type tone, just across like the East Coast, of just getting some bills paid, getting like a Subway sandwich, getting the hot dog, some of that type fare, just in more skyscraper, big city type bustle. It's basically like a good bill paying type song. I mean, I feel like when I said it goes well with Motivation Proclamation, these are both kind of more after hours like effects at like 4:30, 6:30 p.m. But this one just has a little bit more drive about it, a little bit less lazy of a song, I'd have to say. There's some ones on here like Walk By and a couple other ones like I Heard You, some of these type pitches. Walk By is a real nice one. It's like a golden kind of autumn brush, I would have to say, in a hop and bop kind of get supplies, grab some Jack Daniels pitches like that, I'd have to say. It's like a standard kind of day after hours trek to kind of get here. So it's just like some good fare, go to the gas station, get some good stuff, some pitches like that. It's kind of the concept. It's like standard day activity. This would almost be a good combination, one with complicated, I'd have to say. Yeah, I would say walk by is just some good stroll type music, especially like for good October, hop and bop September. I would definitely say walk by is like some good autumn stroll type music. October kind of hop and bops, September kind of hop and bops, November some of those type pitches when it's crisper out and it's pitches like that. Just some good concepts for like some standard kind of relative shindig, just within the appeal behind it, just a little bit bustled in mind, but just not so much like industrial, but just the concept of just having just not being lazy. I'd have to say just within the concept, just possibly just gonna have some fun, some pitches like that. I heard you's a pretty nice one. This is like a jivey kind of shopping mall and social commute. I'd have to say definitely like a day out and about. I would feel like, and this is like a good girlies kind of day activity. I would have to say good flirty type song and like a pop punk type senses within that pitch behind it. And this like some Manila kind of punk to kind of get here. This is just like the standard fare that they did plenty of songs like this, plenty of like that shopping mall kind of gossip and commute that was on Young and the Hopeless from 2002. It's a good pitch behind that initial. It's just like an initial kind of kickoff type one to kind of get here. Some good pitches for that. I mean, obviously, it's the pitch behind being a mall rat, some of that type of tone. It's not really a bad thing to kind of have that relative pitch, but if you do still like to uh, approximate the mall, some of those type fares, just within the standard fare, some good pitches kind of have with that, just good out and about, just within a pop punk sense. But it nails it. I mean, it's a good concept. I definitely recommend that. It's a pretty social one. Let Me Go is a pretty nice one as well. It's like a basic kind of day commerce and activity. I would feel like it's like a standard outing and good car slag. I would just have to say, and it's like a initial kind of emo trailblazer. So it's another nice one here. So as a whole, this album is pretty revolutionary just with some of these type ones on here. Let Me Go, Complicated, Little Things, some of those type ones. I Heard You, Walk By, some of these type pitches just do have some of that initial kind of appeal as far as the kickoff of just what it was doing. I mean, I feel like this project more so than Blink 182's Enema of the State. I feel like Enema of the State was definitely a pretty good album, but it was not emo, just within the sense, like I don't feel like like the cat, I forget the lead singer. I want to say it's like Mark Hoppus or something like that from Blink 182 was not really wearing eyeliner and all pitch black like Billy Joe Armstrong and folks like that, Patrick Stump, some of those type cats. But I do feel like I think it's either Joel Madden or Benji Madden, one of the Madden brothers, as far as those pitches kind of happen, particularly kind of had like some of that just overall emo pitch, and especially for way back in the year 2000, this is pretty good. Like I said, this is an early type pitch. Just thinking back to how many folks full blown were saying emo, and the moody kind of slit, not so much slit your wrist, but just the hot topic kind of at this kind of within the aspect of like moody kind of alternative hot topic type fare just as far back as like 1997, 98. I mean, I think it just was kind of in the more initial type stages that I'd say was a good concept just for some of this kickoff. This is one of those seminal type ones. It's a real kind of placeholder that kicked off some of those particular vibes initially. And some good stuff on here. I'd have to say, I think I Don't Want to Stop. This is another nice one. I Don't Want to Stop is pretty good. This is like a typical kind of romping day antics of a song. I'd have to say it's like a rosy kind of back and forth, this flirty type song kind of get here. It's like a good pop punk album cut, I would have to say. And this album cut gem, I would definitely feel like this song thumps pretty good. So some of these type ones, Walk By, I Heard You, I Don't Want to Stop. These have some good thump about them. Just some real, I want to say more bass guitar centric as far as those pitches kind of happen. Just good concept within that, just within the pitch. Reminds me of like Stained and some of those type folks just from like the early 2000s type fare. I'd have to say it was just an initial kickoff type one that had a lot of good appeal. Just really appreciate the pitch behind it. So that's the concept about this particular project. So I'm probably going to raise the score a little bit just because the initial type fare of just it being a trailblazer of a project and just the initial kickoff of some of these type ones, it definitely had its lane for what it particularly did. Had similarities to folks like Blink 182 and some other punk artists, but it just differentiated because it was kind of kicking off multiple subgenres, and they really mastered this further on like their 2002 album, which got the 4 singles and just overall had the appeal. Just the aspects. So I'm going to go ahead and give this album me recommending 9 songs out of 13 if you don't count the hidden track. I mean, the hidden track, while it has its, I suppose in some senses you could say it could be novel just as like an insular and personal type song. I just feel like probably for the most part, unless you're like in a more personal type mode, it doesn't really have the aspects. I'd probably say I might just go ahead and give this album 9 out of 14, like an 8.25 out of 10. I feel like within that relative sense, I mean, it's going to get somewhere between a 7.5 and an 8.5 out of 10. So I feel like an 8.25 just within the aspect of what it did and the impact of how it had, just the aspect of just being an initial kind of kickoff of like, kind of like a good pop punk and overall mildly initial kind of emo project that had some of that sound to kick off was definitely some good vibes. I mean, this has some social appeal, but then it kind of does. I mean, I look after the social score just to be able to talk about that. Like, this is a good album. Definitely has some good gems on here. There's some immediate ones I kind of feel like Little Things, Complicated, East Coast Anthem, Walk By, some of those type ones that have that appeal, even festival song. But I look after it and say just because of the cash, I mean, I feel like the word of mouth appeal of this particular product is pretty high, and it does have some good social bops on here, like some flirty type songs, some day makeshift, some standard fare like that, some dredge, some of that type ness, a few house party gems, and some good gas station antics to go and get some drink and some pitches like that. So I'd have to say I'll probably give the social score of this album like an 8.5 out of 10. I feel like it has enough gems on here, even if it doesn't have like another commercial highlighted smash like Little Things. There are some other good songs on here, and I do feel like the overall contemporary kind of cult appeal of this particular product in terms of like a more kind of casual type sense is relatively high. So it's a good aspect. It's like a definite kind of highlight for alternative type fold that has more probably treats that are said about it more so than minuses, I'd have to say. Just within the concept I look after in terms of the future, like once again, like Good Charlotte has not put out a project since like 2018. So that's too bad about that. We'll have to see about some more of these. I am going to get to Good Charlotte's 2007. I want to get to some more of these, just get some of these roped up and kind of have that particular pair because there's definitely some excellent type stuff to kind of get here. This is definite alternative highlighted, I'd say, and pretty overall just good look of a pop punk project and like early emo in terms like the earlier stages of it in the early 2000s.